your pastor.
Yes.
They need to know this information. And the ones that are hungry and the ones that really want to be, are bold and called by God in these last days that we are living in, they are going to devour these books.
I wish you'd give them to any preacher you know.
Yes.
And just
evangelists, pastors,
you'll
ministers.
know where he stands after he reads them.
Yes.
He may not tell you, but he will.
But at least he'll know. Yeah, and he'll, I think, tell a little bit.
Why isn't China and Russia doing more to stop North Korea? Both of them probably have it within their power, at least China for sure. But
Pulling back.
we got to have leaders, and this is something that can change our lives right now. This question is very, very important because you got some big boys with some big sticks behind Korea. Korea can't stand on its own. We know that. They can't feed their people on their own.
I don't care.
Would you share a little bit? I think you may mention it in your book, too.
Yeah. China, of course, has 90% of the trade with North Korea. And China, if it wanted to, could put, really tighten the screws on North Korea. To a certain degree, it has. It's cut off some coal imports. We haven't gotten to the point of having an oil embargo, which is something we need to do. Russia, of course, does trade. It sells them oil. It takes cheap labor from there. But at the same time, neither one is doing nearly enough to stop the black market. Keep in mind that those intercontinental ballistic missiles, all of a sudden in this past year, they found a way to fix them. Now, what do you think? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it happened because there's a factory in Ukraine near Kiev that happened to sell some rocket motors to the Russians that ended up in Pyongyang. And those rocket motors made those ICBMs effective. And perhaps, not knowing how many exactly they have, they could, of course, launch a very nasty weapon in our direction. Most of that technology that they have has come through hook or crook, and the Russians and the Chinese know that. And so we would have to get to the point that we're threatening to cut off much of the trade with China in order to stop it. The current president has little interest in doing exactly that. It is, I would say we're getting close, as Secretary Mattis has said, to a true, real threat to the United States. This guy has the means, we do believe. So if we don't take the appropriate action soon, we would like to resolve this diplomatically. We would like sanctions to answer it. And of course, meanwhile, the South Koreans are putting together what they call a decapitation unit, which is an assassination unit. This was in the New York Times. I'm not saying any secrets here. Yeah. They have armed up with Patriots and THAADs. We have increased, we just tested a couple of weeks ago in White Sands the investment we made in the Iron Dome, investment in David Sling, investment in other joint projects with Israel. So, but there's no guarantee whether you have mid-range anti-ballistic missile systems up at Fort Greely, Alaska, or in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. All of these anti-ballistic missile capability is not going to give us 100% surety that we can stop a missile coming from Pyongyang. And the last one went 473 miles in the air, 2,300 miles out. That means that it could go into orbit and it could come down somewhere in the United States if their direction telemetry is correct. So it's a very serious threat. Nikki Haley just said, she gave it to General Mattis, or Secretary Mattis, says, well, diplomacy, we just haven't gone anywhere. We may come to the point that the only thing we can do is containment and deterrence. And of course, that's going to likely lead, I think, as I said earlier, to the Japanese ratcheting up capability, which we don't want to see. And the South Koreans, they're talking about allowing us to bring nuclear weapons back to South Korea, which is something that will give them some assurance. But keep in mind, on the 9th of February of this coming year, what's going to happen in that country? The beginning of the Olympics.
Oh.
I'm not a prophet, but I would guess something's going to happen around the 9th of February of this coming year if we haven't resolved the problem with Kim Jong-un, because they have every incentive to disrupt what's going on down there and continuing the spectacle that they've had. North Korea has long been a very serious threat. I go back to the years when I was in the field and near the demilitarized zone, and Colin Powell called me and said, "Bob, you need to bring your forces in because saboteurs have just come through and they're in your area." I saw some very terrible things that happened to Americans over there. These people have a reputation, and it's well-deserved, and they are very, very serious, and they'll kill, just like this guy killed his half-brother. And they do that to us, too. So we need to make sure that we act prudently, but at the same time, we defend America.
Yes.
Historically, was it not possible for us to leave one united Korea?
It was. We failed to do that.
Why?
Because, one, I would argue that General MacArthur was pulled out by your favorite president.
No, and he's not my favorite. I just don't hate him as much as Republicans do.
Well, it probably would have resulted in the use of nuclear weapons because the Chinese had hundreds of thousands of soldiers in there. And then we took quite a beating at Chosun and elsewhere. But we should have left a united Korea.
This is such a warning that you need to take care of problems before they grow. And this problem, I've been to Korea. Lori's been to Korea.
I love South Korea.
And,
I have to tell you.
There's some of the biggest churches, Christian churches in the world are in Korea. I mean, amazing, amazing, amazing.
And when you go to Prayer Mountain there, it's just, close to the DMZ. It is just the most amazing experience to go spend time there and
some loving people there.
And they're
you
so
think, wouldn't it be
reverent.
amazing
They're so reverent towards
if
the
all the
Lord.
Korean people could have been together and not in this.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think that they could be.
We're in situations right now in the world that without God, and that's why for us to keep throwing God out all the time.
Yeah.
Without God, we don't. To take terrorism. This will be my last question, I promise, Colonel.
Oh boy.
But why aren't we doing more about terrorism? See, I know enough about what's going on to make me dangerous, I guess, but enough to know that Donald Trump, really is concerned about terrorism. A lot of what he wants to build a wall mainly because of terrorists.
That's
Not because of some little guys that are going to come and help harvest your crops. That's not what this is about, is it, Colonel?
No.
Don't go away. We'll be right back after this special message.